Hey everyone, Steve here with Phantom History. Thanks so much for checking us out on YouTube, and if you enjoy our content, make sure you subscribe. Enjoy this episode. While investigating on the stage, which once served as a loading dock for the railroad in the early half of the 20th century, psychic medium and paranormal investigator Orion Michael caught a spike on his EMF meter. At the same time, he also felt what he describes as static electricity around him, and he knew he was likely connecting with a spirit. He paused and shared his findings with the curator of the Dunnellon Train Depot in Citrus County, Florida. That's when she shared that in that location, just a few feet below where Orion was standing, a little boy had perished more than a century before. I'm Steve Blanchard. Welcome to Phantom History. Platted as a railroad town in 1890 by John F. Dunn in rural north central Florida, Dunnellon became known as Boomtown. That is in thanks to the Atlantic coastline, which built the Dunnellon Train Depot in 1908. The depot was a major transportation point and carried everything from passengers and cargo to phosphate, timber, and even the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. The boom soon quieted, however, when phosphate ran low and mining shifted elsewhere. But the train depot remained active, and in the 1940s, during World War II, the train passing through Dunnellon carried troops, supplies, and other military equipment. As the transportation needs of the state evolved, the train depot fell silent. That was until 1991, when the Dunnellon Historic Society purchased it and began restoration on it in 2002. Today, it stands as a venue for weddings, concerts, psychic fairs, and more. But many say it's not just ticket holders who are enjoying the entertainment at the venue. The remaining energy from those who traveled through the depot remains. Orion Michael is a psychic medium and paranormal investigator who says the Dunnellon Train Depot is the most active location he's investigated so far.
The places that I haven't investigated so far here, the Dunnellon train station has been number one as far as the experience and what's going on. So far in the investigations I've done, I believe I've done the Brooksville Train Depot, I've done the Dunnellon twice, and I've done the Mary Stringer House.
Orion says he has had psychic abilities since he was a young boy, and even remembers conducting his first paranormal investigation as a 10-year-old inside his friend's home. It wasn't until more recently, however, that he became more active in investigations and now actively seeks out locations like the Dunnellon Train Depot. While the depot is not a large building, it does have a lot of activity, according to Orion. Passengers, railroad workers, and curious onlookers made for a high-energy location for decades. That energy is likely still there because of what Orion refers to as stone tape theory.
There's a theory. It's called stone tape theory. It's when a traumatic event is, traumatic in a past life, that it absorbs the stuff around it, absorbs the energy of that, and it replays it. There's many cases of this. I've done a lot of research in it.
It's this theory, Orion said, that explains his experience on the former loading dock that now serves as a stage in the train depot during his very first investigation there. There, he said, he encountered the spirit of a young boy.
So we started this investigation, and I just had this awkward feeling on the stage. In 1908, it was not a stage, it was a loading dock. That's the reason why the door on that side is the same height as the stage, whereas the door on the other side was not. And they made it a stage at some point, I think in the 70s, 80s. Like I said, it was originally a loading dock. The stairs are original and all that. So we were all sitting there, and I'm walking around with my EMF detector. Now, if you don't know what that is, it reads electromagnetic frequencies. It's like static electricity. It's what ghosts are said to be made up of. So when you think you feel a ghost, you feel a cold spot, you get the goosebumps, that's static electricity. That's what EMF detector reads. It reads in milligauss. So I'm walking around the top of the stage, and I started getting milligauss spikes right there, only right there. It was really weird. My wife goes, there's a lot going on here.
At that point, Orion shared, the curator of the depot spoke up and shared that it was believed that a young boy had passed away under the loading dock that is now the stage in the early years of the train depot's history. She also shared that she had seen the boy in what is now the kitchen of the building, peering at her from around the corner. She went on to say that she and other staff members would often leave rocks under the stage for the spirit boy to play with. When she returned, she said, she and the staff would find the rocks stacked.
So we start continuing on, and my wife, who carries protective crystals on her, she goes, "Do you want to play with some rocks? I have rocks." Then we got on the topic of him for a little while. We start trying to see if we can see him, talk to him, all that fun stuff. Not a whole lot more. Well, maybe a couple hours later, we find ourselves back out in the front room, and we start to try and guess his name. So we started going back and forth, and we did eventually settle on Timmy, or Timothy as his full name. And I used a little bit of my mediumship skills. I call it remote viewing, to kind of view him. That I remember viewing him to have a leather coat on, short, dark hair. I think he was between 8 and 12, somewhere around in there. He wasn't very old at all. So, like I said, we were all standing in that room, and we started talking about him, and it was almost like a flash. I'm getting information about him. I got the years, I believe it was between 1911, 1912, somewhere around in there, that this had happened, that he had died under there. And then I started getting, I believe it was December, January, when it was cold, because that's why he was wearing a jacket. We started to, further investigate. We all started pitching what we thought. And we eventually came to a conclusion that he had actually got forgotten about by his mom. She got on a train and left, and he hid under the stage to wait for her, and eventually perished under what was the loading dock, now is the stage.
Orion believes that there is still energy under the stage connected to young Timmy, and that he remains connected to the curator of the train depot. That could be, he believes, because she looks like the mother of the child, and the child sees her as a familiar figure.
And she said that he's always been connected to her. And I was like, man, I believe it's because, you really resemble his mom. It's the mom figure that he lacks, that he's sitting there waiting for her. And she starts crying because she's really emotionally connected to him.
The connection could be so strong because of the death of the curator's own child years ago. Upon realizing that, Orion said he knew what steps he had to take next to help the spirit of the little boy rest more easily. And that next step directly involved the woman who ran the historic depot.
At that moment, I knew what had to happen. Because of how connected he was to her, I was like, all right, come with me. I took her by the hand. We walked out to the big door, and I was like, all right, we need to, you need to tell him it's time to move on. It's time to get on the train. Your mom's here and stuff like that. And we ended up going outside, and from that moment on, it felt like the entire weight lifted off the train station. He had found his mom and he moved on. At least that's what we believe. That's what I could see. That's what everybody felt.
Later, Orion contacted his grandmother, who is also psychic and well-connected metaphysically. He told her about the night's events, and she offered a little more detail based on her own abilities, which made the events of the investigation make even more sense to Orion and the other investigators.
I called my grandmother and I told her, and she goes, wait, you think that he's connected to her somehow? I was like, yeah. She goes, huh. I believe that actually is his mom reincarnated in the next life. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense, considering she ended up back with the place in this life, lost a son in this life, just like her last life. Now, what really tied it all together was when we very first came to the train station, to the Dunnellon train station, she greeted us. We all said hi. She showed me this picture of a cast on the stage after a play. And then they took a second picture of the same stage, and there's a full body apparition of a woman standing right over where the boy died on the stage. Now, we didn't know the significance until after, but we believe that picture is of in her past life who came back to look for her son. I believe that the loading dock, now the stage at that time, absorbed the energy of her looking for her son, and it was recaptured on camera all these years later.
So does this mean that the Dunnellon Train Depot is no longer haunted? Not exactly, according to Orion. While he does believe that the spirit of the little boy is now at rest, he doesn't think Timmy was or is the only spirit there in the depot. The residual energy of the building continues to echo the past life of the depot, where emotions ran high with either anticipation of a visit or despair of having to part ways with a loved one.
Because it's a train station, it saw a ton of people in its time, even nowadays. Not as much come and going as it was back in the day, but for a 100-year-old train station, like I said, it's seen a lot. I believe that the place is 95% residual energy, come and go, because it's a big hub for spiritual energy. But I do believe a couple spirits do reside there, Timmy being one of them. And now that his spirit has actually moved on, he just comes back to visit his mom. And then the residual energy from the traumatic event, I believe, still resides there, because that you just can't rinse that away. You might be able to help it move on, but it doesn't completely go away. It was traumatic.
While the Dunnellon Train Depot today provides access to the entire building when people visit, when it was first constructed, it was done so with division in its plans. Segregation was very real, and 2 entrances were created for passengers, one for African Americans and one for Caucasians. Today, the area that originally served as a waiting area and ticketing booth for the African Americans hoping to take the train now serves as a museum, which is easily accessible from the main entrance. The inequality expressed from the design created an emotional response from passengers using the depot, and that could explain why a spirit of an unhappy male is still spotted by investigators and psychics.
I believe in the museum side, there is a man. Back in 1908, the world was divided, segregation and stuff like that. I believe it is a man of color who was there and very angry, because obviously back in the day, nobody was treated fairly. And he is stuck there. I don't know if he worked there. I'm not too sure, but it was on the colored side, which is the museum side. To be honest, I'm not sure of any others. I haven't really tuned in on it, but I walked into the museum and I walked over there, and I got dizzy immediately. I had to walk out.
The Dunnellon Train Depot hasn't welcomed train passengers in a long time. In the 1960s, the Atlantic Coastline Railroad merged with Seaboard Airline Railroad, and eventually the depot became obsolete. The tracks are now only used to haul freight, and there is no longer a stop at the historic building. Instead, the depot serves as a community space thanks to the Historical Society of Dunnellon, who renovated it in the early 2000s and now hosts fairs, concerts, and celebratory gatherings. Inside, historic murals painted by Tom Ferry are displayed and show a visual historic account of the one-time boomtown. While Dunnellon may not be a tourist destination, it has caught the attention of horror fans. The 2001 horror film Jeepers Creepers was filmed in part on Dunnellon roads. Does that attraction mean there are other spirits lingering in this historic city? Quite possibly. And more local legends and lore need to be investigated, Orion believes.
Dunnellon, I definitely believe, is more on the spiritual side. For the size of the town, the actual town, and then the size of just the Dunnellon in general. I mean, there's a lot going on there. I've heard before that there is a haunted road with haunted children that will push your car. Now, I've heard this in other states too, but I've heard that was a thing, and I still have to look into it.
Thank you to Orion Michael for sharing his experience with me for this episode of Phantom History. Remember, you can see and hear the full interview with Orion on our sister podcast, Conjuring Phantom History, available at phantomhistory.com or on our YouTube channel, or anywhere you stream podcasts. Music for this episode was provided by Purple Planet Music and Silverman Sound. Follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and YouTube to keep up with everything at Phantom History, from the podcast episodes to special events and happenings at Phantom History House, a paranormal-themed bed and breakfast experience in Tampa, where you can come and share your own ghost stories with me. And, as always, thanks for listening. Hey, thanks so much for watching that. Remember, go to phantomhistory.com and sign up on the newsletter so you are alerted when we have a new podcast. And check out our new bed and breakfast at phantomhistoryhouse.com, where you can book your stay and we can talk ghost stories in person in the library. See you then.
Hi, it's Tim and Steve.
Here are a few reasons to visit Phantom History House.